Imagine having the most heavily guarded, um, famous home in America. You know, you're downstairs just reading in the parlor. Your baby is upstairs sleeping.
Right.
And in this terrifyingly brief, like 2-hour window, someone manages to prop a crude homemade wooden ladder against the wall, bypass the floorboards, and steal your child without leaving a single adult fingerprint behind in the nursery.
It is honestly the ultimate nightmare scenario for any investigator. You have a crime scene that demands just absolute surgical precision to solve.
Yeah.
But instead, because of who the victims are, you get an absolute circus that basically compromises everything.
Let's unpack this by starting with that terrifying timeline at the Highfields estate in Hopewell, New Jersey.
Sure.
It's March 1st, 1932. The baby is put to bed at 8:00 p.m. Charles Lindbergh gets home at 8:005 p.m. By 10:00 p.m., the nurse, Betty Gow, goes to check on the child, and the crib is just completely empty.
Which gives us a window of opportunity of barely 2 hours. And frankly, it's even narrower than that, considering the parents were awake downstairs the entire time, literally just one floor below the nursery.
Wait, let's really think about that timeline for a second.
Okay.
Compare this to a modern burglary, right?
Okay.
The window of opportunity is usually days. You go on vacation, you come back on Sunday, the TV is gone. The police have no idea if it happened Tuesday morning or Friday night.
Right. Exactly.
But here, the kidnapper had a 2-hour window with the world's most famous, well-resourced family sitting right underneath the target. And the intruder was so agile, so precise, that they didn't even disturb a suitcase and some toys that were piled right under the window they entered through.
It's incredible.
Plus, no adult fingerprints. Doesn't this level of precision heavily suggest the kidnapper had, like, inside knowledge of the home's layout and the family's schedule?
Well, that was the immediate assumption, yeah. It felt like a surgical strike. But the problem was that verifying any of that became completely impossible because of the immediate aftermath.
Right, the circus.
Exactly. The local police in this rural area were just completely ill-equipped for a crime of this magnitude. Within hours, well-meaning searchers, locals, and military colonels who just wanted to help had swarmed the grounds,
Just trampling everything.
completely trampling the crime scene. I mean, there were actual footprints in the mud outside, leading away from that crude 3-section wooden ladder left behind alongside a chisel.
Oh, man.
But because the scene wasn't cordoned off or secured by modern standards, preserving that fragile exterior evidence was just a lost cause.
And because local police had completely lost control of the scene, Charles Lindbergh basically felt he had to go rogue to get his son back. He was so powerful and so desperate that he essentially took over his own investigation.
He did.
And that desperation opened the door to the grifters.
What's fascinating here is just the psychological phenomenon of it. Desperation makes even highly rational people vulnerable to chaos. Keep in mind, at this time, kidnapping wasn't automatically a federal crime.
Oh, really?
Yeah, there was no FBI mandate to step in and take over.
Yeah.
The local authorities were completely deferring to a grieving celebrity father.
And the chaos is just staggering. You have Al Capone offering from his prison cell to use his criminal empire to find the baby in exchange for his freedom naturally. You have a con man named Gaston Means who uses his background as a former federal agent to sound credible. He manages to swindle a wealthy socialite, Evelyn Walsh McLean, out of $100,000 by claiming he had secret contact with the kidnappers.
Which brings us to arguably the most bizarre character in the entire saga, a man who called himself Jafsey.
Yes, Dr. John Condon. He's just a retired, eccentric school teacher from the Bronx who decides he wants to help.
Right.
So he literally puts an ad in the local newspaper saying, "Money is ready, Jafsey." And incredibly, the kidnappers accept him as the intermediary.
It's wild.
But I have to ask, why would Charles Lindbergh, a man with endless resources, the ear of the president, and top-tier connections, trust a random retired teacher to hand off his $50,000 in ransom money?
Well, because the kidnappers explicitly demanded it.
Really?
Yeah, they sent a note to Lindbergh's lawyer stating they wouldn't accept anyone directly from the Lindbergh camp. They wanted a completely neutral third party. Condon was just the guy who raised his hand at the exact right time, and the kidnappers seized on him.
What follows is literally a scavenger hunt. Condon is directed to vacant Frankfurter stands. He's walking through Woodlawn Cemetery at night, meeting a shadowy guy with a Scandinavian accent known as Cemetery John.
Just bizarre.
They demand proof of life, so the kidnappers actually mail the baby's laundered sleeping suit to Condon. Eventually, Lindbergh and Condon hand over $50,000 in gold certificates in another cemetery. But the tragic end to all this is that on May 12th, a truck driver pulls over into the woods and finds the baby's body,
Yeah.
scavenged by animals just 4.5 miles from the Lindbergh estate.
And the coroner determined the child had been dead for roughly 2 months. This meant the baby was likely killed by blunt force trauma to the head the very night of the kidnapping.
Which makes Lindbergh's next move completely boggle my mind. He insisted on cremating his child's body the very next day.
Yeah.
Why on earth would you destroy the most vital piece of physical evidence in a murder investigation?
Well, it speaks to Lindbergh's absolute need to regain control and privacy after the media circus, coupled with the era's utter lack of modern investigative protocol.
I guess that makes sense.
But while the physical evidence of the child was gone, the physical evidence of the ransom money was just beginning its journey. This case is what prompted the Little Lindbergh Law, making it a federal crime to transport a kidnapped victim across state lines.
Right.
That finally brought federal agencies into the fold. And those agencies had a brilliant forward-thinking strategy for the ransom money.
Here's where it gets really interesting. The gold certificates. But let's explain what that actually means, because, we don't use them today.
Right. A gold certificate was a piece of paper currency that was directly tied to an actual amount of gold held by the bank. They had a very distinct gold seal on them. But right around this time, during the Great Depression, the U.S. government was taking the country off the gold standard and legally requiring citizens to turn in all their gold certificates for regular cash.
Meaning, if you were walking around trying to spend gold certificates after the recall, you're basically waving a giant red flag.
Exactly.
Add to that, the investigators had recorded the serial numbers of every single bill in that $50,000 ransom and handed massive booklets of those numbers out to banks and businesses. They essentially turned the money into a tracking device.
They really did. For over 2 years, these bills pop up randomly, mostly around New York, but the person spending them always slips away.
Always.
Until September 1934. A suspicious gas station manager in Manhattan gets a $10 gold certificate from a guy buying 98 cents worth of gas.
Wow.
The manager thinks, this is weird, we're off the gold standard, so he takes his pencil and jots down the guy's license plate on the margin of the bill, 401341.
And that license plate is the thread that unravels everything. It leads police straight to the Bronx to an unemployed German immigrant carpenter named Bruno Richard Hauptmann.
Yeah.
They search his garage, and they find $14,000 of the ransom money hidden in a tin can.
It is the ultimate smoking gun.
Yeah.
But Hauptmann's defense is, well, it's truly something to behold.
Wait, hold on. I have to jump in here because Hauptmann's defense is that a dead guy left a shoebox in his closet.
Yeah.
How did his lawyers even attempt to sell that to a jury? He claims his deceased former business partner, a guy named Isidor Fisch, went back to Germany and left a shoebox on the top shelf of Hauptmann's closet.
Right.
Hauptmann says he later discovers it's full of cash, realizes Fisch owed him money anyway, and just starts spending it. I mean, if your friend leaves a shoebox in your closet, goes to Europe and dies, do you really just accept that it happens to hold a massive fortune and start day trading without asking any questions?
It is a highly unbelievable narrative, yeah. Especially when you dig into the mechanics of Isidor Fisch's life. The police tracked down Fisch's landlady. She testified that Fisch was practically destitute.
Really?
Yeah, he could barely afford his $3.50 weekly rent. He certainly wasn't sitting on thousands of dollars in gold certificates. Finding the money shifted the entire nature of the case. It went from a cold, theoretical mystery full of rumors to a tangible prosecution grounded in physical data.
And that macro shift from eyewitness testimony to physical data brings us to the trial of the century, where things get incredibly scientific. I want to talk about the silent witnesses, the ink and the wood.
Yes.
This is where forensics basically grows up. Let's start with the ransom notes. There were 15 of them. And Clark Sellers, a handwriting expert, testified that they were completely linked.
Yes. The writer was clever, but left massive forensic footprints. They used a specific signature, which, by the way, the kidnapper spelled with an N on the notes.
Oh.
It was a symbol made of 2 interlocking blue circles, a red circle, and 3 actual holes punched right through the paper.
But it wasn't just the symbol, right? The physical paper matched. The second note literally fit into the jagged, zigzag tear of the first note left in the nursery, like 2 pieces of a jigsaw puzzle.
Exactly.
And the spelling. Hauptmann wrote phonetically based on his German accent. He spelled did as T-I-T. He spelled boat as B-O-A-D. He spelled our as O-U-E-R and not as N-O-T-E.
And he had highly peculiar letter formations, too. He would write the word Z, so it looked like U-E or H-L-E, and he habitually wrote his X like a double E.
Here's the craziest part to me. When police arrested him, they asked him to give a handwriting sample. He actively tried to disguise his handwriting.
Right.
But the disguise he used was the exact same disguise used by the kidnapper 2.5 years earlier.
Unbelievable.
He even had Dr. Condon's phone number and address written on the inside of his closet wall. Hauptmann himself famously realized he was doomed, saying, "Dot handwriting is the worstest thing against me."
The ink was absolutely devastating for him. But the wood analysis was revolutionary. This is the moment the courtroom shifted from relying on people's memories, which we know are flawed, to relying on physical objects, which carry a memory of their own history.
Enter Arthur Kohler from the Forest Products Laboratory. I look at Kohler like a modern DNA analyst, but instead of swabbing for genetics, he's looking at tree rings and planer knives.
That's a great way to put it.
He gets hold of the crude kidnap ladder left at the scene.
Right. This ladder was made of 3 sections, using North Carolina pine, Douglas fir, and ponderosa pine. Kohler zeroed in on one specific piece of wood used for the uprights rail 16.
And he traces this piece of wood all the way back to Hauptmann's own attic floor. I mean, think about how tree rings work. They're basically nature's barcode. Depending on the weather and rainfall each year, a tree grows at different rates, creating a totally unique pattern of rings. Kohler proves that a missing floorboard in Hauptmann's attic perfectly matches rail 16. The grain of the wood, the barcode of the tree rings, even the eccentric pine knots, they match perfectly when you line the ladder rail up against the remaining board in the attic.
And he went deeper than just the wood grain. He looked at the nail holes.
Yeah.
Back then, builders used 8-penny cut nails.
Okay.
Unlike the round wire nails we use today, cut nails were stamped from a sheet of iron and had a very distinct rectangular shape, which left a specific rectangular hole in the wood. Kohler showed that the cut nail holes in rail 16 lined up exactly with the joists in Hauptmann's attic.
But wait, I have to play devil's advocate here. The New Jersey police were known to be incredibly corrupt, and they were under massive pressure to solve the crime of the century after 2 years of total embarrassment. And the defense actually had 9 handwriting experts on payroll, though they only put 1 on the stand. So couldn't the police have just gone up into Hauptmann's attic after they arrested him, ripped up a floorboard, cut it down, and built that rail to frame him?
It's a very logical suspicion. But here is why planting that evidence was mechanically impossible. The ladder was extensively photographed, documented, and locked in an evidence vault at the crime scene in 1932.
Oh, I see.
The police didn't even know Bruno Richard Hauptmann existed until September 1934. They couldn't retroactively build a ladder in 1932 using wood from the attic of a guy they wouldn't meet for 2 more years.
Wow. Okay, that entirely shuts down the planted wood theory.
Furthermore, if we connect this to the bigger picture, Kohler analyzed the tool marks. A planer knife is basically a spinning metal blade used at lumber mills to smooth out raw wood. If that blade gets a microscopic chip or defect in it, it acts like a typewriter with a broken E key. It leaves a raised ridge on the wood every single time it spins. The lumber mill that processed that specific board had a defective knife that left a distinct pattern every 0.93 inches. Rail 16 and the attic floorboard shared that exact manufacturing defect.
And Kohler also proved the ladder was assembled using Hauptmann's own tools, right?
Yes. Kohler used a technique of placing thin paper over the wood and rubbing a soft pencil over it to capture the exact microscopic ridges left by a hand plane.
That's brilliant.
He matched the marks on a ladder perfectly to a dull 2.5-inch hand plane found sitting right there on a shelf in Hauptmann's garage. Framing him to that microscopic degree of botanical and mechanical perfection was virtually impossible.
So Hauptmann is found guilty. He's sentenced to death in the electric chair, but the state actually offers him a deal. Give us your co-conspirators and we will spare your life. And he refuses.
He does.
Right to the end. In his final letter to Governor Hoffman, he says, "I will go gladly. It means the end of my tremendous suffering. I am dying an innocent man." So what does this all mean? If he was guilty and he had a guaranteed out to save his life, why not take it?
This raises an important question, and it's one that criminologists still debate today. Was Hauptmann the lone mastermind? Was he a designated fall guy for a larger ring? Or was he simply a peripheral player, the guy hired to launder the money who just got left holding the bag?
And there's so many lingering inconsistencies that point away from him acting alone.
There really are.
Witnesses the night of the kidnapping saw a 1929 Dodge with New York plates, and they reported seeing multiple vehicles and up to 3 men near the scene. When Dr. Condon met Cemetery John, John explicitly told him there were 5 people involved in the ring, 3 men and 2 women.
And we absolutely cannot ignore the ladder itself. Hauptmann was a skilled professional carpenter by trade, yet the kidnap ladder was incredibly crude, poorly designed, and frankly just shoddy.
Right.
It actually broke under the intruder's weight during the crime.
Exactly. Why would a professional carpenter build a tool that bad for the most important high-stakes crime of his life? Doesn't this heavily imply someone else built it, or that he was just a small piece of a much larger puzzle?
It certainly cast massive doubt on the lone wolf theory. This brings us to alternative theories, like the one proposed by investigator Robert Zorn, who pointed the finger at 2 men, John and Walter Knoll.
The Knoll brothers.
Right, they were German immigrants who perfectly fit the profile. One of them actually matched the physical description of Cemetery John and had the exact same bizarre thumb abnormality that Dr. Condon noticed during the ransom drop.
Oh, wow, the thumb.
Yeah. The Knoll brothers had ties to Hauptmann, making it entirely plausible that Hauptmann was brought in later to handle the ransom money. You see, the physical evidence connecting Hauptmann to the ransom and the construction materials is ironclad.
Unquestionably.
But the evidence placing him, and him alone, inside that second-floor nursery is entirely circumstantial. There's a massive gap between proving he possessed the ransom and proving he actually struck the fatal blow.
It's a mystery that refuses to fully close. We've spent this time unraveling the incredible, groundbreaking forensic science that caught Bruno Richard Hauptmann. We've seen how tracking gold certificates, analyzing the microscopic ridges of a handplane, and matching the tree rings of an attic floorboard shifted the justice system from eyewitnesses to physical science.
It really was a turning point.
It pulled federal agencies into local crimes and birthed modern police protocols.
But we are still left with glaring loose threads. The conflicting witness reports, the multiple footprint sets, the unspent majority of the ransom money that simply vanished into thin air.
And I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over. We mentioned earlier that no usable fingerprints were found on the ladder. Well, there was an expert named Erastus Mead Hudson who believed he could pull prints using a very rare experimental technique involving silver nitrate.
Which is brilliant because silver nitrate reacts chemically with the salt in human sweat to reveal latent prints on porous surfaces like wood.
Exactly. He tested the ladder with silver nitrate, and he didn't find Hauptmann's prints anywhere, even in the spots the builder had to have touched. But instead of preserving this finding, the New Jersey police completely washed the ladder to remove the silver nitrate.
Oh, that's tragic.
In doing so, they permanently erased any chance of future DNA testing or modern fingerprint analysis. We so often think of the passage of time as the great enemy of the truth. But what happens when the very investigators trying desperately to solve a crime are the ones who unknowingly wash away the evidence that could answer our questions forever?
It's a chilling reminder that the pursuit of justice is only as flawless as the humans conducting it.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the source material. We'll see you next time.